these oppressions are being felt throughout the colonies, but um, the distance between the colonies is so great that it's hard for people, say people in Massachusetts, to know what people in Georgia are up to or doing, or how they're experiencing this. And so what happens is that all of the assemblies of the American colonies, even the one in Massachusetts has been outlawed, right, form what they call committees of correspondence. And what these committees do is they write letters to the other assemblies to try to devise a common response to what they consider to be British oppression. And they finally realize that they're not getting anywhere because it's just taking so much time and it's so burdensome. And so what they decide to do is to call a Congress, all right? And we call that the First Continental Congress, which is called in Philadelphia in 1774. When they come together, what we're going to see, and this is a common theme in American politics, starting really even before the Revolution and going all the way up until today, and that is that there are always two voices in American politics. All right. So in the First Continental Congress, we have two different groups, and the two different groups are called the radicals and the conservatives. Okay. Radicals would be people like, at this point, you could say John Adams and Sam Adams and people like that who want to break away from England, who think that that the United States should be independent, right, or the colonies should be independent, and the conservatives who are saying no, we should find some way to find common ground with the Parliament so that we can stay part of the empire. And in fact, the idea of leaving the empire is almost unthinkable, right? So the result of this is that this divide will end up with creating two different responses on the part of the American colonies or on the part of the Congress, right? And one of them is going to be the Suffolk Resolves, which is the platform of the radicals, and the other one will be a Declaration of Rights, which is the platform of the conservatives, right? So let's talk first about the Suffolk Resolves, and I'm going to show you a lot of things here. You don't need to write all these down, but let's just think about what they tell us, all right? They denounce, first off, what are the Suffolk Resolves? Suffolk is the county in Massachusetts where Boston is. And what happened after the coercive acts was that the local representatives came together and published a set of resolves in response to the coercive acts or the intolerable acts, right? So this is actually something that the county that Boston is in has done, okay? And what they did was they denounced the intolerable acts. They decided to boycott British imports, not export anything, refuse to use British products, pay no obedience to the Massachusetts Government Act, which means that they'd taken away the right of the assembly, or the Boston Port Bill, which closed the port, right? So they're going to pay no obedience to that. They're going to demand resignation from those appointed to the new government, refuse to pay taxes, support a colonial government in Massachusetts free of royal authority, and urge the colonies to raise militia of their own people. All right. Okay. So now let's think about this for a second. If you were going to sum all this up, what do the Suffolk Resolves say to the British? Is it saying, yeah, we totally believe that the British government is legitimate and we're going to follow the law?
No, this is basically the start of the revolution, you could say.
Exactly. This was a revolutionary act, right? So the revolution in ideas has already started, okay? And then when we see the Continental Congress adopt the Suffolk Resolves, what that's saying is that the American colonies are not going to acknowledge royal authority until these acts are repealed. So in essence, uh, the American the American Revolution has already begun because Americans have said we're not going to follow the law. All right, you guys follow me here? Questions, comments? Okay, so then the other thing that they do is they pass a Declaration of Rights. Okay, basically saying that we are being oppressed by the Parliament, and we have rights that the Parliament shouldn't be able to curtail, and but we're still loyal to the King, right? So the idea here is that again, as I showed you that kind of little diagram of the empire on Monday, that the Americans don't think that they owe any kind of allegiance to the Parliament, only to the King, right? And that's what they're saying here. And their idea is, well, if the King really knew what the Parliament was doing, he wouldn't let it. But the King obviously did know everything about what the Parliament was doing, right? So at any rate, this is going to be the more conservative response of the Congress. So we have a radical response and a conservative response. And then when Parliament learns about all of this, they say, okay, well, you guys can't rule yourselves anymore, and they outlaw all of the local assemblies. All right. So from this point on, we really have two competing governments in America. There's the local assemblies who don't actually dismantle, right? And then there's the royal authorities that are appointed to try to bring the colonists back into line. Okay, you guys follow what I'm saying? Questions, comments? Okay, so now remember the last thing that was in the Suffolk Resolves said that they were going. Let's just take a look here. The last thing was urge the colonies to raise militia. Okay, so the idea then of the militia is what? The idea of the militia is we need to defend ourselves against the British, and the way that we're going to do it is we're going to arm the citizens, and we're going to train to oppose oppression. Okay, so they start training their militias. Okay, questions, comments? All right, so now you guys have heard the shot heard around the world, and this is an interesting episode. Okay, so this is George Washington getting ready to fly to secure the airports. This was in response to Donald Trump's 4th of July address, where he said that the American revolutionaries secured the airports, right? So this is them going to secure the airports. It's a joke, okay? But what really happened here was that the royal government in Boston finds out that the militia has not only been training, but they have a cache of weapons in Concord. Now, this is about 10 miles, okay? So what the governor in Boston says is that he sends soldiers to capture the arms in Concord take them away from the militia, essentially to dismantle to disarm the colonists, right? Okay, so you guys know about the poem, The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere, one if by land, two if by sea, whatever, right? The idea here, though, is that as the British start to march toward Concord, the militia starts to form up, and by the time that they're formed up, they're here in Lexington. Okay, so Lexington is just a little tiny village, and it's got a big square in the middle of it that they call the Green, right? Lexington Green. Okay, and what happens is that the militia's formed up in the road on the Lexington Green, and the British troops march into the village, and then they face off, right? And what happens then is that the British commander orders the militia to disperse, and they actually do start to disperse, But in the middle of it, somebody fires a shot. And as it is with these historical things, nobody knows who fired the shot. We don't know if it was British, if it was American, but what we do know is that they started fighting each other. Okay, and the British actually are going to get the worst of it, and the reason why is because of the way the British fight. Okay, so the way the British fight is that they form two lines. Okay, and then when one line is standing and firing, the other line is on their knees and reloading. All right. So this is the way European warfare is done at this time. Okay. And their expectation is that the other side will do the same thing. So we have these two lines up and down firing at each other, and whoever wins the battle is whoever's still standing at the end. Right. So that's the way the British expected the Americans to fight. Okay. But now I want you to remember back a couple of weeks ago when we talked about King Philip's War. Do you remember that? King Philip's War? And how did the Indians fight that that caused so much trouble for the British, for the colonists? It was because they hid behind rocks and trees and things like that, right? And they didn't fight by the rules. And that's what we see happening here. Americans have adopted that style of fighting, right? So Americans are fighting what they call Indian style, and the British think that's not fair, but they don't know how to respond to it. You follow what I'm saying? And that's why the British actually take a lot of casualties in this battle. Nevertheless, they are able to make it to Concord, and they do get the arms, and they go back to Boston. But it gives it creates a sense that maybe the Americans could actually beat the British with just a militia. Okay. Oh, and by the way, these militia were trained to be called up on a minute's notice. So the militia ends up being called what?
Minutemen.
Minutemen, exactly. All right. Okay. Now I want us to take another step back here. Okay. And I want us to think about what we just witnessed. And what we witnessed was a powerful central authority who was trying to exert oppressive power over the people. And one of the ways that they want to do that is by disarming them. Okay. And this is going to be something that Americans remember. Americans remember that that there was this powerful central government that tried to take away their ability to enforce their rights. Okay, and so when the Bill of Rights is being written later, right, they will remember this. And one of the amendments that they'll put into the Constitution, the Second Amendment, it's actually was the third at the time, but it's the Second Amendment now. Okay, one of the amendments that they'll put into the Constitution is a check on the power of the central government to disarm the states. Okay, so the purpose of the Second Amendment was to prevent something like this from happening, to prevent the central government from being able to disarm the states. Okay, so that was the purpose of the Second Amendment, and that was the way that it was actually interpreted all the way up until 2010, right? In 2010, Supreme Court magically found an individual right to gun ownership, right? And that's what the NRA and that crowd says about gun ownership now, is that you have a constitutional God-given right to own guns. That's not what the Second Amendment was for. That's the way it is interpreted now. But even that has a limit on it. So if you look at the actual Supreme Court ruling, you will notice that even if there is an individual right, the right is not unlimited, and it talks about different ways that the states have a right and a responsibility to limit, to restrict gun ownership. Okay, for public safety. All right. Anyways, you can go back and look at that later if you want.